I'm going to be ranting pretty hardcore today because something happened to one of my favorite competitions of all time, and that is Davis Cup. Basically, they wanted to turn Davis Cup into the World Cup of tennis, and you can't do that because the World Cup of football or soccer in the United States is the most popular competition in the history of sports, and despite the fact that it's held at a neutral site, it doesn't matter because people watch it on TV, people travel to the neutral site to watch. It makes absolutely no difference. But you're not going to be able to create that in tennis because what they did is they destroyed the #1 aspect of Davis Cup that made it so fun, which is the home court advantage. So let me quickly give you a history of Davis Cup. So it's a competition that started in 1900. Originally it was United States against Great Britain. And it was a very important competition in the world of tennis. Back in those days, it was more important than a Grand Slam tournaments. And of course, over the course the next 100 years, it lost a little bit of relevancy, mainly for the fact that some of the bigger names didn't play Davis Cup every single year. They did play it. So if you're looking at the big four, Murray, Djokovic, Federer, Nadal, they all won Davis Cup. In fact, Nadal won it 4 times. So the big names did play Davis Cup, but not every year. But to me, what makes Davis Cup so exciting is that it doesn't need big names necessarily, because often you got to see players who are maybe not ranked as high playing a super important match in front of a big crowd. And Davis Cup also highlighted doubles, where you watch the doubles where maybe throughout the course of the season you don't really watch doubles in a Grand Slam or in a regular tournament. But in Davis Cup, people loved to watch doubles. And in addition to that, what happened a lot of times was the format of Davis Cup made it super tense, because the way it worked was on Friday you had 2 best-of-5 singles, on Saturday you had a best-of-5 doubles, and then on Sunday you had 2 best-of-5 singles again. The team that got 3 points first would win the tie. So naturally, sometimes you would get the tie to be 2-all, and then you had a deciding singles match to determine who was going to win. It doesn't matter what player was on the court. This was some of the most tense, some of the most entertaining, some of the most fun tennis to watch. So let me give you an example of some of the great Davis Cup matches. I don't remember personally because I was too young, but a lot of people were talking about this match as one of the greatest of all time, and that was Wilander against McEnroe in 1982. The quarterfinals. It was one of the longest matches of all time. McEnroe ended up winning 8-6 in the 5th. But I do remember when France beat the United States in 1991. I have never forgotten this match. Out of all the Grand Slams that I watched, out of all the Master Series tournaments, this one still stands out because the atmosphere of that match was unbelievable. It was held in France, and Henri Leconte and Guy Forget ended up beating the United States. Guy Forget clinched it against Sampras, and Leconte beat Sampras on the first day. And you can watch some of these clips on YouTube. I've never seen atmosphere like that during a tennis match ever again. Now, me being a huge Sampras fan, my favorite Sampras wins came in Davis Cup. And I'm going to give you one example. In 1995, in the final, USA against Russia. It was in Russia on an incredibly slow clay court, and you guys know that clay wasn't Sampras' favorite surface, especially if it was slow. And on the first day, Sampras beat Chesnakov 6-4 in the 5th, and he fought so hard that they had to carry Sampras off the court because he had full body cramps. Now the next day, Sampras comes back and wins the doubles with Todd Martin, and then on the final day he beats the legendary Evgeny Kafelnikov in straight sets. And I can tell you that out of all of Sampras' Grand Slam titles, still to this day, that Davis Cup tie stands out as Sampras' greatest achievement. Another thing that I love about Davis Cup is when small countries won the Davis Cup, which was so meaningful to them. And for example, Serbia with Djokovic winning Davis Cup in 2010, or Croatia winning Davis Cup in 2005 and 2018. And there was, of course, other countries that won Davis Cup as well that weren't some of the big tennis nations. I'll never forget a match that didn't feature a superstar player, and it was the final between Russia and France, where Michael Yuzhny played Paul-Henri Mathieu, and Mathieu was up 2-0, and usually ended up coming back and winning that match. This was in 2002, more than 20 years ago, and I still to this day didn't forget about this match. Why? Because it happened in Davis Cup and the atmosphere was absolutely insane. So this is what we enjoy Davis Cup for, is for the passion, for the emotions, and for the tension that's built up, and it's for the atmosphere. And unfortunately now this has been destroyed. So let me tell you how Davis Cup works now. It's supposed to be the World Cup of tennis. So you have groups of teams that travel to a neutral location, and then they play out their matches in a round robin format and they advance to the next stage. So last week Davis Cup was held at 4 places, and one of them happened to be Split, where my mom lives. And I was trying to tell my mom about Davis Cup and get her excited, and I told her to go on the internet, and she told me, Nick, I can't find anything. And I got to tell you that the Davis Cup website is one of the worst websites ever. It was pretty bad back when Davis Cup was still okay, but now that they changed the format, it's pretty close to impossible to find results on there. I happened to see the second Croatia match against the United States with Goyo against Tiafoe, and I tried to look what happened in the first match, and it took me a good 10 minutes to find the first score of the tie. And mind you, I'm by no means computer illiterate. So that's a problem, that it's very confusing and it's hard for people to find and figure out what's going on. But on top of that, think about the fact that you're going to have Finland and Netherlands play in Split, Croatia. How much sense does that make? Is anybody in Split going to care about watching Finland against Netherlands? Maybe a few people, but you'll never ever get the passion in the crowd when you have 2 random countries play each other in a neutral location. And look, team competitions are great in tennis because we were so used to being out there by ourselves, so it's fun to be part of a team. That's why I enjoyed playing college tennis so much. And there are other tournaments in the world of tennis that are team competitions. Back in the day, they had the World Team Cup in Düsseldorf shortly prior to the French Open. A lot of the big names who played that tournament. Now a similar tournament is held prior to the Australian Open called the United Cup. Of course, you have the female version of the Davis Cup called the Billie Jean King Cup. Of course, we have the Hopman Cup, which is a male and female, and then they play mixed together. This used to be held prior to the Australian Open. Now, interestingly, it's after the French Open for some reason on clay. But despite that, Alcaraz still played it this year. And of course, one of my favorite tournaments is the Laver Cup. So there's a lot of fun team competitions. But the Davis Cup was always the most meaningful and the most important tennis team competition of them all. And unfortunately, the intention of getting more relevancy to Davis Cup is having the opposite effect. It has lost in relevancy, and you think that the big name players are going to play it now that the format has been shortened. No, they're not. The reason why you see big players playing Davis Cup nowadays is because they want to be eligible for the Olympics. That's the main reason. So Djokovic, of course, is a big patriot, and he won the Davis Cup with Serbia. He loves playing for his country, no doubt about that. But isn't it a little bit weird that he's playing Davis Cup a week after the US Open? The only reason why he's playing it is because he needs that eligibility for the Olympics, and that's basically what's making these big name players play Davis Cup. If you go on the internet and if you read some of the comments of the pros, everybody is in agreement. Everybody hates what they did to Davis Cup. It's been completely ruined, and unfortunately we as fans don't get to enjoy it anymore like we used to. And look, I'm observing other things in the world of tennis that I'm not going to get into now in detail, but I always say if it's not broken, don't fix it regarding tennis technique. But in the world of tennis in general, listen, tennis is a game of tradition, and the system is excellent. It doesn't need changing. Okay, can you tweak it a little bit here and there? Absolutely. For example, maybe they should have done Davis Cup every 2 years or every 4 years. Why not do that instead of ruin the whole thing and take away the home court advantage?